Hi, my name is Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the reports that Boris Johnson is actually planning to mitigate some of the problems waiting for us in 2021, which is absolutely cracking, exactly what I think a Prime Minister should be doing. Unfortunately, he's planning to mitigate the damage from the perfect storm of 4 destructive events that he and his party have caused. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, 2020, that's turning out to be fun, isn't it? I'm fairly sure that everyone agrees with Boris Johnson that life under his majority rule is a cracking success. But he hasn't finished yet. He's planning even more fun for us in the next year. So cast your mind back to the beginning of 2020 in the UK. And we had a double emergency. So the first one, of course, winter flu, taking its toll, usual toll nowadays, on the NHS. Some hospitals had no spare capacity at all because they'd never recovered from the previous winter. Years of underfunding and breaking up the NHS into smaller, less efficient components meant that we had to endure the sight of patients, first of all, being left on trolleys in corridors, and then not even on trolleys. And then the second thing, of course, was the flooding in parts of the south of England and South Wales that Boris Johnson cared so little about that he couldn't even be bothered to authorise a COBRA meeting, which is the Cabinet Office meetings that occur whenever there is a national emergency that needs the government to coordinate a response. Now, in early 2021, we are also likely to have those 2 emergencies hitting again, and with the same Prime Minister who did sod all about it this year, and the same party in government who caused the problem in the first place. Now, just to be clear about the cause, be fair, Phil, you might be saying neither winter flu nor flooding is the government's fault. Act of God, isn't it? Not exactly, because winter flu, of course, is a natural act and it is going to happen, but the fact that the NHS cannot cope with the situation is because they don't have the extra capacity to do so. The NHS is not funded to be able to cope with the realistic large capacity at certain times of year, as I've already alluded to, which is a direct result of the Conservative government. The situation that we meet in winter now is not always as it was. As for the flooding, that is absolutely the government's fault. The rain is not their fault, the flooding is. We keep building on floodplains despite the constant warnings against this. The fact that the heavy rains have nowhere to drain is because we have ignored the issue. Now, when I last talked about this, I was reminded by a Dutch viewer that the Netherlands had a bad bit of flooding at one point in their past, and then the government went, hey, we don't like this, we're going to do something about it, and now people don't get flooded out of their homes every year. But of those 2 emergencies that we're currently bracing ourselves for, there are going to be, in addition, 2 others, which are in themselves even worse. But the combination, of course, will be greater than the sum of their parts because it will put pressure on the same aspects of infrastructure, the same emergency services, for example, the same government departments. The same weak points are going to be put under pressure by all of them. So the effect will not simply be cumulative. We will also be subjected to a no-deal Brexit and the continuing coronavirus emergency that some people seem to think is over with the way they're behaving. Now, that would be the no-deal Brexit that the government have tried to claim that we are prepared for, in which case, why do you have to bring the army in to plan for it? And the coronavirus emergency that Boris Johnson just told us would be over by the end of the year because he said life is going to return to normal by Christmas. And it goes without saying that Brexit is entirely a Conservative creation from start to finish. And although the coronavirus pandemic itself is not the Conservatives' fault, it is their fault that we will not have any serious control over the situation for next year. Bear in mind that the government's own chief medical officer said that he does not expect any improvement until spring at the earliest. And although the government have admitted serious planning for these combinations of events, including, as I say, bringing the army in, and they are planning for the worst case scenario, of course, it's not like at worst we would be hit by all these events. You know, the way some people can say, oh, well, if that's the worst case scenario, what the likely scenario is actually mostly going to be fine. No. The flooding is very likely to hit at some point. It may not be January, as it was this year, but there is a significant risk. It's not certain. This is the one that's not certain, but there is a significant risk of it hitting at some point next year, in the first half of next year, in fact. And it's not like, you know, we can treat these things as getting one emergency out of the way at a time, because the no-deal Brexit will make us weaker. It'll hit harder the longer it goes on. It will be really bad in January. If we persist, it will be worse in February, worse still in March, and so on. So the longer it takes before we're hit with the flooding, the worse it could actually be, ironically. And you could argue that if any aspects of this quadruple threat of Brexit, COVID, flooding and the flu are delayed, it works in our favour, because at least it means more time to plan and prepare. I would say look at our preparations for both coronavirus and Brexit. I mean, sure, you've got a situation where Boris Johnson has announced that he wants government departments to work with the army on planning for this quadruple threat for next year, and he wants that planning to be completed by the end of August so that preparation can be put in place. I mean, all that sounds fine. I'm not knocking that. I'm knocking the need for it, but I'm not knocking the action. But you look at the fact that the government, the Conservative government, began serious planning for a major viral pandemic and for Brexit in 2016. Here we are 4 years later, and we are less prepared than surrounding nations who were also preparing for these events. Anyone seriously thinks that a bit more time will really help us? I mean, I don't wish for all these things to hit at once, but my point is that delaying it doesn't just mean we can deal with one at a time. It means that when the next one comes in, we're still on our arse from the previous one, because it won't have gone away. The no-deal Brexit is not going to go away until it's no longer a no-deal Brexit, until we've come to some arrangement with the EU, even if that means going back into the transition period, whatever it happens to be. Until the situation is not a no-deal Brexit, it's going to get worse. Same thing with coronavirus. Until we get something to deal with it, it's going to get worse. The winter flu, eventually it stops being winter. But that's a lot of lives lost if we're not prepared for it. And the flooding may or may not happen. If it does, bear in mind that the floods that happened this January still haven't been dealt with. They're still going on. They're just not that newsworthy because we have a serious plague and an economic crash on our hands. But that, you know, the floods are the one thing that are not at least certain. The other three are certain. That's definite. We know that the NHS is going to be put under intolerable pressure this winter from seasonal flu. The government have promised a much wider vaccination programme to try and ease this. I mean, that's something at least. The no-deal Brexit, I mean, it's not technically certain, if you wish to argue the toss, because the government could still avert it, you know. However, I don't see that as being politically feasible. So I think it is safe to treat the threat as certain, even though there is a way to still avert it. That results in food and medicine shortages, queues at ports, mass unemployment, and I have no idea what the government think they're going to do to take the sting out of it all. As for the coronavirus, we can't say there'll be a second wave until it's clearly happening, but I mean, I think, you know, you'd have to be mad to look at our response in conjunction with what's going on around the world and think that we're going to get away with it. I mean, the United States didn't get away with it. Why are we different? British exceptionalism again? Even the vaccine isn't going to help us directly there, because even if the Oxford team do come up trumps, and this is literally the only way we're going to be getting a vaccine in a timely manner, given that we have refused to join the EU scheme, which could have allowed us to hedge our bets. I mean, I would have thought one thing that Tories know about is hedging. But even if this only shot works out, which it may do, it won't be in time to deal with the second wave if it hits later this year. Also bear in mind that when schools and colleges fully open again in September, there are no real safety measures in there. Individual colleges will do what they can, of course, and schools as well. But there's no social distancing requirements, no face masks, anything like that required. So although we're going to be doing what we can as educators, there is no reason to suppose that jamming loads of people into close contact without face masks and then all disappearing off to their separate households again is going to do anything other than feed a second wave. And that is assuming that the behaviour that's going on outside of education doesn't feed it as well. And what prompted me to sort of think about this really is I was listening to my girlfriend talking to a friend of hers, a work colleague, who was a bit down on 2020, and she was saying, well, don't worry, it's been bad, but 2021 and all that. And I'm just thinking to myself, 2020, it's been bad, and we're more than halfway through, just a bit. It's likely to get worse before the end. I'm not really seeing 2021 looking better. I think as bad as 2020 is, 2021 is shaping up to be worse. But there you go, I'll leave you with that cheery thought for the weekend. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.